A lot of people, they have standards, but they may not necessarily be accredited. Does that mean that they are bad organizations?
Not automatically. And no, clearly the answer is no. It doesn't mean that they are bad. What an organization that takes the time and the effort to become accredited, that is to say, to submit themselves to a third-party review for purposes of demonstrating that they have achieved or met a certain standard. What that means is that it is important to them and important to their stakeholders that they demonstrate that they have indeed built their program to meet certain ends. And if they don't do that, it doesn't automatically mean that it is not a worthy or an effective measurement program. But what it does mean is that consumers or people who are not necessarily intimately aware of what's going on may not be as sure that they are built to that standard. It's harder to tell as a third party.
I think it's important to get the message out about not only the standards for certification of persons, but also accreditation of those standards, because there are so many certifications out there that are just not valid certifications. And unfortunately, the public and employers and stakeholders aren't aware of the difference between a quality certification and one that is a poor quality certification. And by having standards and accreditation to those standards, it provides the assurance that individuals need, and it also helps those who don't have the skills or don't have the knowledge to understand what is a quality certification. So if all they have to remember is look for an accredited certification, that helps a bit. And it's important to get that word out because I think that there are so many instances. I see a lot as a psychometrician, a lot of certification programs that are just not valid at all. I have a perfect example of one. I don't want to give it, but
so Cindy, when you say not valid, would you explain exactly what that may actually mean in practice?
Sure. They are certification programs that aren't measuring what they think they're measuring. So when we develop a certification program, we look at what the job is that we're going to certify or what the body of knowledge is that we're going to certify. And we take a look at what is it that that person has to do. And then we develop some sort of a measurement instrument to measure that body of knowledge. Sometimes though, the instrument that we end up with isn't actually measuring what we think it's measuring. And I'll just give the example. We could have a very long scenario question with a long essay response. And I will ask, are we measuring knowledge associated with that scenario and that response, or are we measuring reading ability and writing ability? That's just one example. But when I talk about certifications that aren't valid, sometimes, and it's sad, but sometimes a certification body that doesn't even understand that there are measurement principles will bring a group in and they will just brainstorm together. Oh, let's just write some test questions. And I have actually seen test questions that ask things like, which is better for a blonde versus a brunette? Which is totally not valid. It doesn't relate to any body of knowledge, any valid body of knowledge. So that's what I mean by validity. Is your process, your examination and your assessment process actually measuring the knowledge and skills that it needs to measure for that particular job?
Yeah, it dawns on me that I think most people actually really appreciate the big point that we're saying here. If we talk about, would anyone really want to go to an unaccredited university, to one where the credits that you earned at that school are not reasonably transferable to another school if you go elsewhere? Accreditation is something that's known and understood in the academic world generally and accepted as a rather obvious kind of no-brainer point of quality. But I think the key difference here within the world of personnel testing and maybe even licensure to a degree is that simply there is a method of accreditation, but it is not quite so obligatory usually as it might generally be within the world of academia. So just as most people would accept the premise in terms of higher education, the same thing applies for using tests to demonstrate one's skill and ability.
And so the bottom line is accreditation is based on standards and standards that are valid and often predict quality.
And Roy, you mentioned there is a standard for accreditation bodies. That standard, ISO IEC 17011, really talks about how an accreditation body should operate. And ANAB is evaluated to that standard, and it assures the certification bodies that the accreditation body is actually following an open and transparent and fair process as well. That is unique. It is unique to ANAB in the United States in that the other accreditation bodies that I mentioned, for example, NCCA, as far as I understand, they are not evaluated themselves on how they operate. So that's unique to ANAB, and that's something that I think ANSI and ANAB should be proud of, is the fact that they are evaluated to a standard themselves.
That is so true. And, you know, most people know about higher education accreditation, the recognition given by the Department of Education for them to conduct accreditation of universities and colleges. But very few people know that there is also a recognition process by the International Accreditation Forum of accreditation bodies that look at certification. And so again, there are a lot of parallels in the university community and how they look at quality and the mechanisms they use as well in certification. But the ones in certification are very not well known because it isn't something that the general person knows about. But they should be aware that the quality assurance process for certifications in this country is as equal to the quality assurance processes in the academic community.